This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. We have an explosive, mind-blowing, mind-bending show. It's been going on all week long, and I think the Doc and myself are still picking up the pieces. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. We're just going to kind of cut to the chase. On this week's show, a ton of news. There's a lot of things breaking. We've got a new television wrestling promotion coming out. We've got some big names in WWE coming back. I think the biggest story of the week, though, was what took place in AEW. I think it took us all by surprise. We've got to talk about things that are setting up for WrestleMania in WWE. But I think we kick this show off with what took place this week. I believe it was on Tuesday in AEW when the announcement came down that Cody Rhodes has stepped away from AEW, and him and AEW have just completely parted ways. It sounds like it was very cordial on both sides, but there's a lot to unpack here. Helping me unpack all of it is the one, the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Can you imagine you go negotiate with the company that you helped founded, and they're like, well, your request may not be met because we've decided to add 6 other people from the place you came from. And you're sitting there going, wait a minute, I have to ask? I have to negotiate? What the heck is going on here? And bottom line, I think everybody's recognizing that Cody Rhodes, most people want to chase the best thing that's available. And I think, too, on just a quick side note, having a baby will change you. Once you see that little creature come out, you're responsible for everything that happens to that person. And I think when you look at it on a strictly business level, if company A says we can do this for you and company B says we can do this, you look at it and you say, well, I could really, in a long view, he's still like 35, 36 years old. He could take 5 years and still go back if the other company in AEW is thriving. So for Cody Rhodes, once you recognize he didn't sign right away, I think it was plausible. Most people didn't think he'd do it because why would you start a company and then leave it? But man, and the crazy part too was what made me mark out was we were just spitballing it, just saying WWE step up to the plate and do this. Do it with the EVP. Are you kidding me? I was marking out. I was like, dude, we talked about this because that's competition. They've been taking AEW, and now WWE is about to debut the single greatest potential star that they could have now at this point in time because of what he represents. I thought it was crazy news. I wasn't shocked by it because WWE is not just going to take their, thumping just lying down. But I didn't think in a million years it would be Cody Rhodes. I thought maybe a Darby Allin, a younger star, maybe the big run at MJF in a couple years. But I thought maybe, we were spitballing and maybe just do it sooner. But Cody Rhodes, bro, what was your first reaction? Was it in the back of your mind? Did it become more believable as we spitballed it last week?
So I don't know if I don't believe it or if I just don't want it. I'm not 100% sure where I fall on this. It shocked me when I heard this because you have to remember the whole reason AEW started was because of Cody Rhodes. It was Cody Rhodes accepting a challenge by Dave Meltzer on Twitter. Dave Meltzer responded to a fan a couple of years ago saying no other promotion but WWE will ever fill a 15,000-seat stadium. And Cody was like, okay, I'll take that bet. And then he basically, him and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega put on the first All Out? Or it was All In. It was the first edition of All In. It was absolutely incredible. After the success of that, that's when they went and they found the Money Man. That was when Cody Rhodes went and found the Money Man. The Money Man being Tony Khan. He was like, look, we got this idea. It's going to work. And Tony was like, all right, cool. I'll invest. I'll back you. And I think that's where some of this kind of fell apart because brings in Tony Khan. All of a sudden, everybody gets these EVP titles, right? So Cody's an EVP, Kenny's an EVP, the Bucks are EVPs. And the weird thing is, everybody but Kenny's on, I think, a 4-year deal. Everybody else has a 3-year deal with an option where Tony can just pick it up. And he picks up the Bucks. I think he picked up Hangman Page's. He picked up Chris Jericho's. Everybody but Cody's gets picked up. And in between then and basically today, there was a lot of rumblings about the EVPs kind of having falling outs. There was some questions that Cody was a little bit difficult to work with in the back. It sounds like the thing that really pissed Cody off was the fact that Tony Khan started stripping away a lot of responsibilities from those guys. It sounds like, in all credit to Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated, does a great job. Wrote a fantastic article because I've been reading up as much of this stuff as I possibly can because, like you're laying out, he could possibly show up at WWE's Elimination Chamber. We're recording this just hours before the Elimination Chamber. My hope is that he doesn't, because I would be so sad. And I'll explain to you why I don't want him to go to WWE shortly. But he started stripping away these powers. And to Cody, it wasn't even so much the money. And Cody referenced his contract in one of his promos, that he got his contract and he didn't like the dollar amount. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that he couldn't be the booker. Cody Rhodes, basically his legacy has been to pay homage to his father. And the one thing that he loved to do was to be the booker. Basically, Tony Khan stripped him of that. And Tony Khan, in a piece, I think it was with Forbes, went on to list all these things that he does. Owner, head of creative, booker, which was the sticking point for Cody. And this led to a big argument between the two in the back, and it led to a big blow up, amongst a myriad of other things. And to me, it just seems like you have a guy who had the original vision, the guy who had the impetus and the ability to pack the arena and to basically bring you a new form of wrestling, something that was fantastic. And then you had the guy who has the money, and they just butted heads. They were initially on the same page, and then they butted heads. And if you remember, like, you go back to the early days of AEW, all the greatest matches were Cody Rhodes matches. Like, the best matches in the company and the best storylines were Cody Rhodes. He carried that company when it was in its infancy. You remember you and I talking about, why isn't Kenny Omega looking like the Kenny Omega that we've seen in New Japan? Like, the Bucks are good, but like, it's just Cody Rhodes. It's just Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes picked that company up and from the very start carried it. To me, it is so weird to now be in a AEW world where we don't have Cody Rhodes. It is so strange to me. But to answer your question, to get around to answering your question of seeing him in WWE, yeah, I think it's incredibly possible. I think it is incredibly possible because here's the thing. If you can't get the money that you want from the company that you founded, and somebody else is willing to make you a crazy offer, a Brock Lesnar type deal. And for those who don't understand Brock Lesnar's deals, you see how much he actually wrestles. He makes somewhere close to $9 million just to show up. It's absolutely insane. So somebody offers you a Brock Lesnar-like deal to put asses in seats and to be the first defector of AEW. Yeah, you're not going to have booking control. You're not going to have a lot of creative control, which would suck. But I guess I understand why you would take that deal. My whole thing is, I don't know if I would go to WWE. Would you go to WWE if you are Cody Rhodes? Would you go to WWE?
If they're willing to make some concessions, if the idea is they're willing to work with you. You got to remember too, as a child, as a young adult, he witnessed his father really become the American dream and take it to the heights of unknowns when he was in WWE. Yeah, Dusty Rhodes made his name in WCW, bled all over the place. But once that WWE product got him, when he was with the Polka Dot Lady and the manager and the American Dream song came out, that's when he became like a worldwide sensation. And so Cody Rhodes, seeing the relationship that he had with his father, obviously there's a tie there, and he never burned the bridge. I just think that potentially, just from that point of view, you just get tired of being Stardust and being used as the ninth guy. If you can come in and say, look, I want $3 million, but I want assurances that I get one title run, that's all you need. And do you know what? You can make a living for the rest of your life off of 1 3-year run in WWE.
Yeah.
Great match with AJ Styles, great match with Drew McIntyre, great match with Seth Rollins. I mean, you got to remember, he was Stardust in WWE. We know him as Cody Rhodes because of the work he did at Ring of Honor and the work that he did building up AEW. But he was never this guy in the suit and the crazy stupid ass tattoo in WWE. Could you imagine the pop he's going to get just off of his name alone and the stuff that he could do? It's untapped, and it's all ego, money, all wrapped up into one, where you want to see, can I do it on the big stage? And that's what WWE is you can start new companies. It's a shot to AEW to do this because it now drops the hint that AEW might be on the lower level and puts into the forefront. AEW might be the next developmental thing where if WWE wants somebody, they can easily drop $6 million a year on somebody, and it's just going to be a situation where somebody wants the cash and doesn't care anymore if they're given 9 characters and they're the 9th person on the card. If they get some solid back end guarantees, they get some time, they get some control over their schedule and some influence on their character. That's all it's going to take, because bottom line, WWE's machine can make people worldwide stars, and the residual impact of that is invaluable. I mean, he could travel the Comic-Con circuit for the next 20 years just off of a 3-year run. And yes, you go. You absolutely, if they give you $3 million a year, percentage of merchandise, a little bit of influence, an absolute guarantee that he will never, ever be Stardust unless he wants to joke around when he's 50, then absolutely you go to WWE if the money's right.
See, I don't think him going to WWE and WWE being able to throw ungodly money, because let's be honest, the health of WWE is perfectly fine. It is great. AEW, and we know this as being business owners, it's rough in the beginning. It's tough in the beginning until you get things really rolling. AEW is getting to that point where it is becoming self-sustained, and you don't have to lean on Tony Khan to keep dumping tons of money into it. But it is not at that point yet. So I don't think him going to WWE necessarily demotes AEW as a product. I don't think it brings it down any as what it is. I think AEW is still WWE's biggest challenger. I think AEW largely puts on a much better product as far as wrestling goes and as far as storytelling goes than WWE. I think WWE is just flush with cash. That being said, I get what you're saying, where I could offer you basically the sun, the moon, and half the world, and you could come over here and you could do things. And you're right, 3-year run, do it, whatever it is. But all that being said, I don't know if it demotes, it makes AEW any less than what it currently is, especially with, it seems like AEW's got a ton of great partnerships going on. I mean, New Japan has been referenced so heavily on AEW. I think that adds strength, because New Japan, a couple of years ago when Kenny Omega and the Bucks were there, we were watching New Japan. Like, we were trying to figure out ways to get streams of what was going on in New Japan just so we could stay current on all of it and not watch it on Access where you're a couple weeks behind. We were figuring out ways to pick up that New Japan stream just so we could watch matches taking place at midnight. Like, do you remember that? Like, that's how good New Japan was or is. And then COVID happened and a lot of things shifted around. And we don't spend as much time, because I did the math the other day. If we don't have a pay-per-view, we're watching at least 12 hours of wrestling a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's jacked up, man.
Yeah,
that's a lot of time to watch wrestling.
It is. So when there's news that's cataclysmic like this, we got to get the insight from Kenny as well. So I hit him up and I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, he sends me a text from work. I'm like, "Oh man,
I'm sleeping."
I'm like, he's alive, so that's good. But he's at work. But the news wrapped up, so that's good. He kept Channel 2 on the air, but he is available. I want to get a sense too. Did we interrupt the news with our virus here at DSP? Let's find out. I'm going to dial him up here from our awesome platform here. Let's see if he answers. Let's see if he picks up. Let's see if he's available. He's big time.
Hello.
Kenny is on the podcast. We were just saying before we brought you on that you're big time. We were thankful that you kept the news on the air, and we know you have a propensity to sometimes maybe push the wrong button. So we were talking Cody Rhodes a cataclysmic event. We had to get your sense of it because you are a prominent member of our group chat, and we just got to know, Kenny, what the hell did you think about Cody Rhodes not being in AEW anymore? He could be debuting in less than 4 hours from now at any point. I mean, they could open the show and Cody Rhodes could come out. I have 3 computers set up for this. I have a window to potentially watch it if they debut him in the first 2 hours. I'm excited. I think maybe Adam's excited too. What do you think about it?
I don't know. I'm tepid at best. This could be amazing, but what has WWE done in the last decade with, somebody from somewhere else that would make you think that they would, knock this out of the park? They did AJ right, but then, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're like, AJ Styles who? Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode. We can go on. Some guy named Sting. I don't know if you ever heard of him. They don't particularly care for stars from other organizations. And Vince McMahon's had a hard-on for ruining the Rhodes' reputation for decades. He did it with Dusty, put him in polka dots and made him dance like a moron. He put, Dustin in that gold dust get-up. He put Cody himself in a Stardust outfit. So I don't know. It's interesting for sure. The biggest thing though is WWE. They can't screw this up. They absolutely have to push Cody like he's the greatest thing in the world, because everybody in that AEW locker room is watching. Everybody. MJF, Wardlow, these guys that WWE conceivably could want down the road, Jade Cargill, they're watching. They're going to want to see what happens. And if they screw the pooch with this Cody debut and run, they're not going to want to go over there. Why would they? Cody is a name. Cody's, one of the biggest names in wrestling as far as, mainstream media is concerned. If they're not going to push that guy, why would they push anybody else?
Because Kenny's tepid because he thinks Stardust is going to make a quick appearance and they could ruin him.
Ooh. See, here's the thing, Kenny. If he comes back as Stardust, and this is why I don't want him to go to WWE. I don't believe WWE sees the value in him like AEW seen the value in him, or like he sees himself. You remember when he left WWE, and you remember when he went on a tear on the indies, and you remember how he basically shot to the moon, which then gave him the elevation and gave him the platform to help build and create AEW. It was because he wasn't playing a character like Stardust. It was because he was actually viewed as a legit wrestler. He wasn't this weird gimmick. If he goes to WWE and they do that to him, and I don't want him to go to WWE, but if he goes and they do that to him, I think it's the biggest mistake of his life. I think it's horrible. I don't think they're going to do the Stardust thing. I don't think that they're going to put him back in that costume. I just don't think they would. However, they can. And they also can just not push him. Like I said, look at what they did with Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode was this badass, awesome wrestler. He went to NXT. He was continued to be a badass. And now he's just like some other guy in tag teams. Like he's always teaming with somebody else, and he's just kind of that secondary dude. They're not gonna put him in the Stardust costume. They could, and they might, and that would be a mistake. But they're just not gonna. I don't have the confidence that they're gonna push him properly. And See,
yeah.
I feel the same way, because this is WWE's thinking on it, right? Ever since you've had Stone Cold and you've had The Rock, you've really never had a wrestler that's really ascended to that level. The closest probably John Cena. Right now, you've got a bunch of guys who are basically just above mid-card status. Roman Reigns is great, okay? Brock Lesnar separates himself from the rest of the class because he is Brock Lesnar, whether it's MMA, which makes him a little bit more of a realistic character, or it is just his ability to get himself over. Brock Lesnar separates himself, but it is essentially it's Roman Reigns, who's at the very top, Seth Rollins, who's probably a notch below that, Kevin Owens, who's probably a notch below that, and it's just they're just guys. They're just interchangeable guys.
Kevin Owens. No, they don't see Kevin Owens as a notch below Seth Rollins. Are you kidding me? No, they absolutely do not. They've never pushed him that way. I get what you're saying, though. the problem with WWE is they refuse to make stars.
Right.
They put all of their eggs in one basket. So it's Roman, and it was Roman for the longest time. It looks like it's going to be Steiner's kid coming up. Like that's going to be they're going to put all their eggs in that basket. And then they don't let it breathe. You had a can't miss champion in Big E. He was over with the crowds like nobody's business. He's an amazing talent. Crowds respond to him in everything he does, but he couldn't get over as a champion because they didn't have any patience with him. It didn't work, or it wasn't seeming to work. It didn't move the needle in the way that they wanted it to. And so all of a sudden they just started backpedaling, and they went back to the well that they've always gone to. Let's see how we can get Brock involved in this. Let's see how we can get Seth involved. They refuse to make stars, and that's the problem. So like Cody's already a star, but they have to make him be. I don't think if Cody doesn't win the championship within the first 6 months of being in WWE, if he goes there,
absolutely,
I think it's an absolute bust. And again, like I said, you just for the fact that like you're going to pay him a lot of money to do this, and again, you need to impress that AEW locker room. And so if they don't, not necessarily that Cody needs to be champion or Cody deserves to be champion, that's up for debate depending on how you feel about him. But with what's going on right now, if they sign him and they bring him in and they do not make him champion and leave the belt on him for a bit, he should probably win the belt sometime before SummerSlam, and he should carry the belt through, I would say probably at least until Rumble, probably even into next year's Mania, for this to be a successful, like, good run that's going to inspire those people like Wardlow and Jade Cargill. Because let's be honest, those are really the only two people that WWE cares about.
MJF
They don't want.
I know you hate MJF, but MJF.
They don't want MJF. Why would they want MJF? They don't. He's not big enough. He's not a monster. He cuts promos, but they don't want somebody that cuts promos. People are like, oh, he cuts great promos. Who the F cuts promos in WWE? Nobody. They're all scripted. Why would they want MJF? You're like, oh, everybody's like, oh, they want MJF. For what? He brings no value. He's an independent wrestler who can cut a promo. WWE doesn't want that. They had that. His name was John Moxley. Look what happened.
Man, Kenny comes in swinging chairs. I like it.
I told you, man.
That's what we
so
like.
much knowledge. He's great.
He's great.
They don't want MJF. The only reason they would want MJF is so that AEW doesn't have him. They want
Kenny.
Wardlow. They want Jade Cargill. Those are probably the only two people that they want.
What do you think about this? What if, and this is my hope, what if it's all a giant work? Because you had some of the greatest insight into what they were doing with Cody Rhodes' character. He was this kind of tweener, right? He believed himself to be a face, but he was acting like such a heel. What if all of this is just a work and something crazy happens and he either comes back as the baddest heel on the planet, or he comes back as the white meat babyface to save AEW? What if that's the storyline? And it would, I don't know. Like, I just feel like at that point, like, everybody just got worked, right? Like, everybody got worked. Like, we were all in a tizzy on Tuesday and everybody was upset about this. And then this is what happens. Now, you've got to, obviously, you got to let this breathe a little bit. And I think you would probably have to do it before Mania. And I think AEW only has one pay-per-view before Mania. But this is one of those things where I think you could just kind of let things just kind of build and build and build and just kind of add fuel to the fire. And everybody's kind of waiting for that surprise, and he just ends up showing up one day on AEW. I think that would probably be the best way to go.
That would blow the roof off the place. I will say this, though: if it was a swerve of some sort, these reports that nobody liked Brandy Rhodes are killing all of that momentum.
Well, that's the thing, too. I think those are very accurate.
That's also just rumors. I think so, too. Unless those are just rumors and they fed it, that's got to be hurting Brandy's ego. And that makes this – that's why I don't think it's a work. The stuff that came out – because, immediately people were like, everybody's glad to see Brandy's gone. And some people came to her defense and most people did not. But actually, but so if that's the case, that's why I don't think
the people who went to her defense,
they
were the people she worked with predominantly.
the Nightmare Factory people, the women that she's been close with, Vicky, like, yes. So that's Amanda Huber. Those are, yeah. Now, if, Matt Jackson came out and said, we love Brandy, this is dumb, then I could go, you know what? That's a work. The dirt sheets are making something up to try and get some whatever. Because everybody stayed quiet, it's kind of like, ooh, that one stings just a bit. But it could be a work. And, it's a lot of people are making this to be like a death knell to AEW or a huge betrayal on Cody's part. You got to remember, Cody wasn't one of the elite until he left WWE. He wasn't friends with those guys. He didn't go join his buddies in New Japan. He didn't go join his buddies in Ring of Honor. He started working Impact. He started working Ring of Honor. He started working New Japan. And he became friends with the elite. He wasn't one of them. So this whole Cody and they don't get along. Well, they weren't lifelong friends. They had been friends for a couple of years because their business was benefiting each other. So the fact that they aren't a group anymore isn't like this news that people want to make it out to be. Cody wasn't one of them. He wasn't one of their group. He joined because he, New Japan was like, let's put him with the Bullet Club and make that a thing. So he became friends with them because he was working with them. Obviously that maybe deteriorated, but so, Cody leaving is not the biggest thing in the world. Now, I think if the Jacksons or if Kenny left, I think that would be different because those were, I think, more of the together core. Those were the guys that were like, they're in it to win it. Hangman and Kenny and the Young Bucks, they went together. They decided to do this together. Cody was part of that, but he wasn't integral to that part, so.
All right, before
it's interesting.
Before we let Kenny go, who's been gracious to give us a few minutes as he steps away from the news, it's just hanging in the wind. Fox 2, we'll see what happens. Follow him on Twitter.
We're still on the air, I think.
Okay, at TV Chips. Put it on the table. Does Cody Rhodes get over, Kenny? Does he get over? Does he have a good run if he shows up in WWE? Call your shot.
Cody's going to get a pop, and I think the right thing to do is to get him out at Saudi Arabia. You can control that audience. That audience is very docile. They're going to do what they're told. They're going to pop huge for Cody if he comes out. So this would be the best opportunity, would be today.
Yes.
And from there, it kind of just depends on how they do it. If they, if he comes out randomly to start a Raw, I think that's a mistake. If he, you have some kind of number one contenders match and he inserts himself last minute and wins it, I think that's different. It's a bad idea to wait till Mania. I think you need to get him out there as soon as possible. And again, he's got to make an impact right away. He can't feud with Ricochet.
Right.
He can't come out and be like Apollo Crews. He has to be inserted immediately into the main event. In the main event.
Yes. Exactly.
I could see him taking maybe a belt off of Damian Priest or even taking the belts off of Sami Zayn, that mid-card thing. But even then, I don't think that's enough. I think he has to go immediately to the top. He has to be one of the main events of Mania, competing probably for the WWE Championship, unless they put the belt on Brock, which is WWE. It's probably going to happen.
Here,
he needs to be big time.
Can I throw this in monkey wrench into the mix? So he like you said, he shows up today at Elimination Chamber, which makes me sad because I'm not watching that. And I'll be honest, I'll be so upset if he shows up because I don't have the time today to watch it. I'll have to watch it on replay. And like you, Kenny, I don't feel like supporting that garbage. So that's beside the point. But he shows up today in the Elimination Chamber. You have something happens. Brock doesn't end up winning. Brock's already set to take on Roman. All right. We don't need to unify the belts, even though I think we all agree unified belts would probably be the best thing. So less belts make things much, much better, much more competitive. But you can put the belt on Roman Reigns, or not Roman Reigns. You can put the belt on Seth Rollins. And Cody and Seth could then feud at WrestleMania. You could go that route. I don't think Bobby Lashley retains coming out of the Elimination Chamber. I don't think you have to put it on Brock Lesnar. Everybody else in there, I think Riddle would be great, but I think Seth Rollins more of a draw, and it's all about putting butts in seats. And I think Seth Rollins is probably that guy. So in Austin Theory, obviously too young still. He has much more growing to do.
Yeah.
He's just not.
The problem becomes that Brock is in that match, and you got to get rid of him via shenanigans. I think if WWE wants to knock this out of the park, you start the men's elimination chamber, and Austin Theory doesn't come out. Where the hell is Austin Theory? He's laid out. He's not competing in the match. His pod's empty. All the pods start going off. His is the last pod. It opens, nothing, and then all of a sudden, like, Dusty's old music hits, and Cody comes out in his Captain America, whatever kind of gimmick, and wins it. You know, like, that would be the ultimate way to make the impact. That would be the best way to do it. That would be, like I said, that Saudi crowd will go nuts because the prince will tell them to. And it would be an amazing moment. It would be huge. People would be talking about it for months. And again, the most important thing, everybody in that AEW locker room will be talking about it on Wednesday.
Nice.
And that's what you need.
Yeah, nice. Always great insight. That's why he's a prominent member of our group chat. Sometimes the leader of the hating group chat portion of our time. Kenny, I always love the fact that you're awake on a Saturday and come in. Look, we respect your opinion. I know that some things that they do that, you have a vision, and that's why we
I don't think
hear
you're a hater, Kenny.
I think he's the ultimate hater. I think that's great.
I don't think so. I think he's the realist, man.
He's realist. It's not good. WWE has to deliver, and that's
when it's
why
shit, he calls it shit.
Exactly. They have to deliver, and that's why there's doubt. Kenny, thanks for your time. Get back to work. Get the TV channel back on the air. Thank you so much. I had to get your opinion.
Make sure we're on air. Yeah.
Make sure you're.
Kenny, can we have you on like more often? Like, is there a way we can make this like a monthly segment or something?
Yes.
I don't talk to your producer.
Yeah. he might know some people. Yeah, we had to test it out. We have to tell everybody our secrets. We have to make sure this works. It's the first time we did it this way. We have to figure out new and creative ways to have 3 people in 3 different spots that rotate. And I think we maybe have found one. So we'll get Kenny's voice on a lot more for sure. Because it's for sure if he's going to swing bats and chairs at Adam, this is great.
And hey, I'm just tucked away in a back room of Fox 2, just, making it work. So
absolutely. Kenny, thank you so much. Good times, man. Let's check back in soon. Peace.
Thanks, Kenny.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, so man, he brought the noise, he brought the good stuff. I agree, man, because it's an absolute interesting point of view that he brought regarding Cody, and that's what sucks is that there's doubt. There's doubt at this point in time that WWE is going to deliver. But hey, it's WWE, so we got to make sure that they deliver. And I think it's news that sent shockwave across the board. So I can't wait to see how it plays out moving forward. A couple hours away. Because before we get into the news of WWE, they've already made a mistake. The Miz has been bumped to the pre-show. Him and Rey Mysterio will be on the kickoff show, further devaluing one of the great talents. Kickoff show, bro. Come on. Are you serious?
Well, I mean, if you look at this card,
why? It's the Miz. It doesn't make sense.
I get it. You got a Hall of Famer in Rey Mysterio, and you've got a guy who is arguably your best heel in the company, kicking the show off. But who are you going to put? You got a Falls Count Anywhere, Drew McIntyre, Madcap Moss. I mean, that would probably be the one match you could move around, because you're not going to move Ronda Rousey around. You're not going to move the Usos around. Well, you could do the Usos versus the Viking Raiders. That could be your kickoff show. That should be your kickoff show. But that's for a tag team championship. But that should be your kickoff show. If we're really talking about it, that should be your kickoff show. Do you care about the Usos and the Viking Raiders? Do you think the Viking Raiders are going to win this match?
No, not at all. Usos exactly. So that's just you know how I Jones for the Miz and his just being put in that spot. I mean, look, you're on the card. I know that's how they view it, but man, Rey Mysterio as well. Kickoff show, Dominic in the mix. Well, we'll see. Are you excited for this Elimination Chamber? I'm curious. We're not going to do a full preview because, like I said, we're so busy we can't even get to it. I'll be watching passively, and maybe, I guess, it's either going to be in the beginning of the show or, like Kenny said, maybe at the end where Cody debuts. We shall see how it plays out, but these Saturday noon shows is tough because Saturday is my busiest day. I mean, I'm going strong from 12 to 6, so I will be catching up. But the blessing is, when you have the app, you can go back and watch it anytime, but I can't wait to see how the next 4 hours will shake out at the Elimination Chamber in Saudi Arabia.
So I'm not really excited for it because I'm not watching it.
Yep. You're busy.
It's what I'm excited for is I'm excited if Cody shows up, right? If this is the match where Cody shows up, and that would be the only thing that would drive me to watch this show. Like I said, I will be upset if he shows up and I'm not watching it live as it's taking place. That will make me upset. I myself, like how you're busy, how you're basically about to, once we get done with this, you're going to edit this all together and then you're going to go to work. I'm going to be over at the girlfriend's parents' house putting up shiplap on walls. So I've got a bit of a DIY project that I've got to be doing, and her dad likes wrestling, but her mom, it just does not. It just totally, she doesn't get it. Every time I try to explain wrestling to her, she looks at me like I'm batshit crazy. So it's what it is. And usually I just default to it's wrestling. It's what it is. But look, I think if Cody shows up, I think this is the thing that really, really helps set this show apart. And I think the way we've kind of laid it out, I think I kind of like what we've done. I like Kenny's idea about Austin Theory not being in that match. You know, you could see Cody Rhodes even go up. I forgot AJ Styles is in that match. You could see if AJ Styles somehow wins it, and you could have Cody and AJ end up fighting at some point. I think that would be great. But Austin Theory, probably the one guy who just not quite on that level yet. You could take him out and Cody takes his place. I think that would be extremely interesting if that was the direction they were to go.
Okay, and a couple things before news and notes from WWE that we paid attention to. Yeah. Kevin Owens, who Kenny referenced earlier in the podcast, you know, it's interesting because he is somebody that you feel like if you gave him the rocket ship could do a lot of things. But again, he's fallen into the category of he's in the system. They won't push too many people to the moon at this point in time outside of Roman and Brock. And now Bobby Lashley's kind of entering into that ether, but, you know, the way that he's been utilized has not been prime. Kevin Owens has been working as a face, obviously getting a little bit more over with his toughness, with the big spots that he does in big moments, and then using the stunner is just a homage to one of the greats. And stay tuned, potentially returning, interesting. But then he goes out and cuts a heel promo on Texas, which I guess, you know, Kevin Owens is one of those rare characters that whether he's a face, heel, he's just got a badass entrance, a badass look. You know he's got a good work rate, that he's kind of risen above the garbage that WWE gives him. And it's been highlighted, too, because Chris Jericho said it. That was the feud that he had, the best friends feud breaking up. That was the feud of the year, and they only could get as high as second at WrestleMania. Now, he's been involved. He's been in the mix. He's kind of recently, with the new contract, kind of been in the mix now with Seth Rollins. They're telling a story. But why would they do that with Kevin Owens in Texas? What was the deal with that?
So here is the thought. And if this happens, I might go bonkers and lose my shit at your house while watching WrestleMania with you. The way this is seemingly trying to work out. If you go back and you listen to any of the Stone Cold podcasts, Stone Cold has basically been on record as saying he feels he has one more match. Who's from Texas? Stone Cold is. Who is the biggest defender of Texas? Stone Cold is. What move does Kevin Owens have that was made famous by whom? Stone Cold. It was the stunner. So it looks as though we may be building towards a match between Kevin Owens and Stone Cold Steve Austin. The hope from WWE, at least these are the reports, the hope is that Stone Cold comes in and basically works a contract similar to what Edge has, where it's not just a one-off. It's a couple of matches, something almost like Goldberg, but not always going to Saudi Arabia. Probably more in line with Edge and less in line with Goldberg. But he'll be there for a couple of shows. He'll do a couple of matches. And this is WWE basically trying to pivot hard. Because remember, Shane was in the Royal Rumble, and we were supposed to get the Kevin Owens-Shane match. Remember who threw Kevin Owens over? It was Shane. So remember when we were watching it, we were like, oh, damn it, we're going to have this again. So that was the direction we were going back to, was Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon. It was tried and true, and WWE cut, copy, paste. But now that Shane has basically been expedited from WWE, what can we do? How can we build a story? So you see, you have Kevin Owens just cutting promos on Texas, basically calling out Texas. The defender of Texas might be Stone Cold Steve Austin. So it'll be interesting to see how this works. What's your take on if Stone Cold was to show up and be one of the big surprises for WrestleMania.
That would be something to kick off a feud. Why not, baby? I think that would be amazing. An opportunity to have one last match, one last run, and you would definitely have to have Kevin Owens get over, but absolutely. I think that would be the payoff of a long-term...
See, that's funny that you say it that way, because I feel like Kevin Owens should get over.
He has
but
to get
it's
over.
WWE.
Yeah. No, but I think
Stone Cold will end up winning that match.
Maybe. They've been doing a good job lately with getting guys over that need it, especially in these kind of matches. I think the right thing to do, if they present it to Steve Austin, is to say, no, he has to get over. That's the whole purpose, is to, if you do this, maybe as a small sign that Kevin Owens might move into that Seth Rollins rarefied air where he can sustain for a little bit and really play off a character that can really have some great matches with more people. So if you're in that market of creating a star, you have to have Kevin Owens win it. Now, speaking of, I don't see another scenario in which what would benefit Steve Austin. He's a legend. He has the credibility. You got to get the rub over to Kevin Owens, and that's just how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I don't disagree with you. I think at some point you've got to do what's best for business, and taking care of Kevin Owens is probably the thing that's best for business. Now, the big
surprise as well going into WrestleMania is going to be the hoopla surrounding the Hall of Fame. I thought one of the named additions this week was great. Having The Undertaker there, that makes it must watch. You're going to want to hear his speech. Is he going to break kayfabe in the speech? How they're going to do it? I'm curious, what's your sense of how the best way to allow... Now, look, WWE, for those that don't know, their Hall of Fame is more ceremonial, more in line with a production than a real Hall of Fame. Obviously, the majority of the inductees are former WWE stars, but they've given honor to Eric... Eazy-E from WCW, and they've given homage to Ric Flair and inducting him in different factions and things like that. You know, having Eric Bischoff in the Hall of Fame, that speech he gave was amazing. So you look at it, but it's more ceremonial. Like you had Jeff Hardy just flat out turn it down. So it's more in line with, hey, we got this show. We need 7 great people to highlight and things like that, but there's no real spot.
Do you need 7?
Well, I mean, a number. You need a lot of people. You fill out 2-3 hours, a lot of good
speeches.
Here's the thing. But I like the idea of having the Undertaker, at least in this class.
This is the thing. This is how I think you honor the Undertaker, because you have to remember the Undertaker is basically a pillar of WWE. I think at this point, this is probably the one and the only Hall of Fame that you have strictly devoted to one person.
Nice.
Who else are you going to add to this Hall of Fame? He will overshadow and upstage everybody. You do not want to be inducted into this Hall of Fame with this guy. I think what you can do, build the entire thing around him, right? Show his old matches. WWE does a great job of putting video packages together, right? So build this all out. Show this. Do this. And give it to everybody that way. Show his early matches. Show how he came up in the business. Show when he was Mark Calloway and he was working in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and he just looked weird and he looked awkward. Show the early Undertaker. You have to remember, this is a guy who came to WWE and he's had one gimmick his entire career. It was The Undertaker. Now, whether it was The Undertaker or the American Badass, he was always the same guy. He just dressed a little bit different. He's like one of the only guys who's never really changed with the times and never had to change with them. Like, he is a Hall of Fame talent. On top of that, you have the streak. Like, you think Undertaker, you think streak, right? And it's amazing, some of the stories. I think some of the fondest stories and fondest memories I have with the Undertaker was with Paul Bearer and with Kane. And that storyline was so crazy to me. It's like one of those core memories, right? Where you're just sitting around and somebody says Undertaker, and I'm just like, oh, man. And Kane was his brother, and he was burned alive in a house, and Paul Bearer was his dad. And it's like, none of it makes sense, but it all makes sense. It was great. It was absolutely fantastic. I think you give him the entire spotlight. Am I crazy for it or what?
No, it's a great idea. I hope something that maybe they consider. But, they like the big bang for their buck. So I could see maybe 3-4 more. But what a great idea. What a real homage to a character that really just and something that I think Vince respected was the fact that he had an opportunity to go to WCW when the sync was shipping, when the sync was the ship was not doing as well as it could have. Remember, WWE was getting beat by WCW, and there was a situation in which the ship could have sank, but everybody rallied and they finally kicked it into gear with Steve Austin, The Rock, Undertaker, and he was part of it. He partly saved that company from going under from the barrage of WCW. Man, can you say ship sinking 10 times? My God, tongue twister there. Hard for
tongue twister, right?
Yeah, very. Oh my God! But the WWE ship did not sink. And to honor the Undertaker would be something great. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, now you got my juices percolating. 2-night WrestleMania, probably going to be at the Hacienda. Maybe throw a party, kids involved, nephew. You'll get to see their reaction to stuff, and maybe 2-night party, 1-night party. We'll see. We'll figure out how we want to do Mania this year. But I can't wait to see how it shakes out, because now big time stuff could be happening that should steer the ship, and it's going to start with the Elimination Chamber. All right, cuz, hit me at this week's professional wrestling news and notes. Let's bring this baby home. What made your list? What's been going on besides Cody Rhodes this week in wrestling?
So we spent a ton of time talking about AEW, spent some time talking about WWE and Elimination Chamber. We also have Impact No Surrender that takes place live tonight at 8 p.m. Big matches. We've got Moose challenging W. Morrissey. We also have Mickie James defending her Impact World Championship against Tasha Steelz. I expect to see Tasha Steelz possibly win that. We also have Gorillas of Destiny taking on the Good Brothers, and Jay White, your favorite new AEW talent, taking on Eric Young. So it should be a fantastic show. You'll want to check that out I believe it's on Fight TV. You can check that out, or if you have a stream of some sort, you can check it out there as well. Now, some other things going on in the wrestling world. The New Day is no more. It was reported at the end of last week by Fightful Select that not only had Vince McMahon been the main reason behind the New Day splitting up in the WWE draft in 2020, but he also no longer wanted the newly reunited team of Kofi Kingston and Big E to be called the New Day anymore. The report appears to have been confirmed on last Friday night's episode of SmackDown, which saw Kingston and Big E take on Los Lotharios in a tag match. Los Lotharios won the match, and the fans will quickly notice that for the second week running, Big E and Kofi were not referred to as the New Day. Now, everything could change once Xavier Woods is back in the picture. Perhaps Vince doesn't want them to be known as the New Day until they're a trio. We got to wait and see. Now, 2 WWE releases have formed their own promotion, and they're getting a TV deal. One of my favorite guys, EC3, I talked about him a lot. And one of your favorite guys that you got to meet, Adam Scherr, a.k.a. Braun Strowman, have announced that the Control Your Narrative will be a televised wrestling promotion. Noting that a network TV announcement is imminent, the former WWE names stated that the previously announced March 31st Control Your Narrative Awakening event will be a TV special. Matt Cardona, Moose, John Schuyler, Matt Sydal, Maria Shafir, Weston Blake, and Matt Taven are all set to appear for the promotion per the recent press release. So watch for that. Big names returning soon to the women's division in WWE. Asuka has not wrestled a match since Money in the Bank in July, but her return to in-ring action for WWE is reportedly imminent. According to PW Insider's Mike Johnson, Asuka is expected back from a shoulder surgery by the end of February, although it's not 100%, because her return relies on both whether she's cleared by a doctor and when she figures back into storylines. So sometime near the end of February, beginning of March, look for Asuka. The 40-year-old Asuka has established herself as one of the most successful female wrestlers in WWE history since signing with the company in 2015. In addition to Asuka's impending return to WWE, Bayley is reportedly close to reuniting and returning to WWE as well. Per Johnson, Bayley is expected back in March, which would get her in just under the wire for a potential WrestleMania appearance. Bayley has been working her way back from a torn ACL, which she suffered in July while training at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. The injury occurred just before the full-time return of fans at WWE. They were unable to attend for over a year. Remember, due to COVID, they were doing this televised shows, which you appeared in one of those, which was pretty awesome. But that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes, my man.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Make sure you follow the network at Detroit Podcast. When big things happen, look to us. We'll react. We'll post videos. We'll mark out. It's fun times. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, subscribing to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Anywhere that your favorite podcast is housed, we are there. All you got to do, hit that search button and type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Hit subscribe, and our daily content will find you. That's the easiest way to get and download our content, where we do great interviews, break down wrestling, break down all things in the world of sports here in Detroit. Going strong since 2013, going on 3-4 years now of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast, and it's been fun. It's been rewarding to be part of multiple communities here in town. Thanks, guys. I look forward to next week. I can't wait to see it. I think you're going to be doing Bob Vila, but you're going to be seeing some Twitter. I think it's going to happen. So let's hope for me that it's 12 o'clock, because I got a small little 10-minute window from 12 to 12:10, and we'll see what happens. Do they just pay it off right away, or do they make us wait for 4 hours for the payoff? We shall see. Stick and stay with Detroit Podcast as we break down all things in the world of professional wrestling on the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast.